In reality, all humility really is the will to learn. When you admit humility, you're willing that you want to learn. Like, you're in the game, you're in the ring, man. Let's do this. That's humility.
Hey guys, I know you want to get right into the episode, but give me 1 second of your time. Really excited to announce that we are putting on the first, hopefully annual, Metro Boston Fire School right here in Massachusetts, May 17th and 18th. For information on registration, check out the link in the description. Also, check out this awesome swag our buddies over at Smoke Show and Apparel and Black Swine Graphics put together. Could not have asked for a better design. These shirts are going on sale starting today. You can check them out. Link will be in the description, or head over to Metro Boston Fire School on Instagram or Facebook, and you can find a link there as well. We hope to see you guys at the conference. If you can't make it and you still want to support us, grab one of these 6 shirts. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in again to another episode of JobTlks Podcast. I think I say it every time, but I'm excited. Again, today we have a pretty cool guest on with us, Mickey Farrell. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's going on, Will? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, real quick, I listened to an episode, and I know we talked about it just before we signed on here, but you had said that sometimes all it takes is an email and reaching out to people, and you end up talking with some pretty cool people through these platforms, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on and sit with me and talk about the job.
Oh, yeah, man, it's my honor. You have a great show, and you have some great guests, and you're always talking about some good things. A lot of times the conversations get lost, and I think yours usually stay on track, which is a nice, it's a nice little perk.
I appreciate that. My ADD is hard to wrangle sometimes, but I try and keep it in check. Take a little note taking beforehand. I'm sure that anybody that's listening to this already is at least a little bit familiar with you and your platform. So you run Top Floor Tactics and A View from the Top Floor podcast. You're third generation fireman, right? It was your dad and your grandfather?
My grandfather, my dad, my uncle, and some cousins sprinkled in here and there. So it's a family business for sure.
Yeah, and that's what got you into it, running around watching your dad on the trucks?
Yeah, man, as long as I can go back and think, it's, I grew up in the firehouse, and that's it. Like, it's all I can remember as a kid is being around, not even just the firehouse, but my dad's friends too, who were giants to me, and these guys were like the guys I wanted to be so badly. And eventually, as time progressed, here I am living the dream, but it's, I feel like it's been a long road, but really it's just been life progressing, if that makes sense,
Yeah, definitely. Kind of being in obviously the same job as your dad, did you have like a little bit different track than him? Like, did you like certain aspects of the job or certain types of companies a little bit more than he did?
Well, my dad was a volunteer fireman where I grew up, right outside New York City. And my grandfather was a career fireman in Hoboken, which was both on the Jersey side. My uncle was a ghetto fireman in Irvington. And then I had some cousins that they kind of made their way in different areas, mostly in the volunteer world. So I'm the first New York City fireman. But that's awesome. My family brought up through the fire departments in New Jersey.
Awesome. I asked because my dad was military, and so when I was growing up, I wanted to be military, but I didn't quite want to do what he did, so I kind of did the same thing, but carved my own little path, through there. So you came on FDNY around 9/11, right?
Yes.
Do you feel like coming on around 9/11 shaped your career a little bit differently than maybe coming on now or 10 years before then? Just the feeling of the fire service, how big it was in the country at the time, everything that was going on.
Yeah, for sure. So we always talk about September 11th being that 50-yard line, or that dividing factor before September 11th, the job, and after September 11th, the job. But no one speaks about the 50-yard line, and I feel I'm from a unique group of guys that we were during that time. So we were the beginning, fading into the new job. And with that, coming out to the field, walking in the firehouses that lost entire companies, it was a new way of looking at the job. It was a new challenge for both me walking in through those doors, but also the firemen that were waiting for me to walk through. A lot of them didn't think that anyone would ever come on this job again and walk through those doors again. Some didn't want you there, and many of them embraced you and just said, thank you for coming.
That's awesome. I can imagine. It was kind of one of the things I wanted to ask, but I wasn't sure about like how to ask it. Was the reception welcoming because I can see both sides of it, right? So you said you have guys that just suffered a lot of loss, friends, family, stuff like that, and then here are these new guys that don't understand this that are coming through the door, but also in the same token is like, okay, we just had all this loss, all this damage, and these guys are still like willing to come in and do the job with us. So I imagine there's definitely some differing opinions in way you were received in the firehouses.
Yeah, I think there was an attitude that we had walking in those doors was trying to rebuild something that can never be replaced. And that was something that I think when you look back, if you maintain that ability to have the mindset that that's what we're doing, we're not replacing, we're building, that was the ultimate success, and was really hard to kind of wrap that around our brains as well as the other guys. We are here to rebuild. And then after 20 years, we had our reunion, and that slogan still stayed through with us. And we actually made T-shirts with the little slogan in the bottom. It says, "We've rebuilt what can never be replaced." So 20 years later, we felt that we did a great job rebuilding the job and making the job, I wouldn't say better than it was prior to September 11th, but strong and more forward progressing in the sense that we can overcome anything.
Yeah. I can imagine, again, I was listening to you talking on a podcast, and you said that you had one of your drill instructors in Proby school who was going out on the pile at night and then coming in during the day to teach you guys. And I imagine that must hit home. Like we talk about, you're part of your Proby school now. You're an instructor as well, and I'm sure you talk about all the lessons that you see, like in the job, what you're doing. But I feel like at that time when everybody could really see what was going on, that had to be something that hit hard for you guys. Like this guy's out on the pile at night coming in and then teaching us and trying to get us into this job as well.
Yeah, I mean, the instructor, Joe Higgins is his name, 111 truck, Marine, DI, on the pile looking for his brother. And this was a guy that made it very, very obvious and very quickly to us that this job is a lot bigger than you. And I don't care if you worked at Applebee's or Best Buy 3 days ago, you are now a New York City fireman, and the job is much larger than you. And he would bring that back every morning. We would get in a circle. We would rally. He would tell us the brothers they found that night, who they're still looking for. We would say a little prayer, and then we'd go kick some fucking ass that day, and he would motivate us.
I love that. You think, and you feel like that carried through, obviously, you're 26 years now in FDNY?
Coming on 24.
Coming up on 24 years at FDNY. Still have that going through you, I imagine. It's not something that's like easily lost or forgotten,
Well, that's it. I mean, now being an officer, I have kids coming on the job in my company that weren't even born for September 11th. So that's a challenge in its own. And I think what we have to do with that and to keep it alive, because even if you came in 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 years after September 11th, you still understood the job and you still understood the impact of that because, it's something that we're still living. And that's just it, is that being a New York City fireman, it's not once a year that we think about this. You remember, we live it every day. And that's because we walk in the firehouse and we walk past memorials and we drive down the street and people still look at us a little differently, especially the tourists, which make it a little strange when you work in Manhattan. But it's nothing that just comes yearly. It's something we live every day. And I can't stress enough to the young probies that are coming on the job that if you are in that firehouse and it does have a memorial, any memorial, it doesn't have to be September 11th, please take the time to maintain it, to clean it, to have it looking perfect, because you never, ever know when that family member may just randomly stop in. They could be in Manhattan seeing a Broadway show and say, hey, let's go stop in and see the guys, bring some cakes and just say hello and look at the memorial. Because for some of these families, that's the only thing they have left is that memorial. So if it's not taken care of and it's not clean and polished and perfect, I think that's an ultimate disrespect, not only to the families, but to the legacy of the brothers that came before us.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I feel like most firefighters who are into the job, the fire department becomes a big part of their life, right? Like it's a second family. And so I imagine for the families of those people coming into the firehouses, they have the expectation that even though people are going to grow and retire and move positions in companies, but that fire department loves them back the way that they know that person loved the fire department.
Yeah, and I always say that if you take care of this job, you love it and you should respect it. This job will always take care of you and your family for generations and generations, multiple generations. And the best part is you never have to say thank you when you do this. You just do the right thing by giving it back to the next person.
Yeah, I love that. So how long did you work before you thought about wanting to bump up to be a lieutenant? Or was it always a goal that you had, or did you hit a certain point where you felt like Like, oh, I feel like I have a handle on this and I'm ready for the next chapter?
So I never really wanted to be an officer. I just loved the back step. I loved the tools in my hands. Like, that was the job to me. But I came from a firehouse with a lot of really, really, really smart, squared away dudes. And they were studying. And I studied, but I didn't put the time and effort in like they did, mainly because I'm not a good test taker. So I was like, I'm not going to kill myself because I'm not going to do well on this test. I did not that I half-assed it. I did the best I could. And that put me towards the back of the list. I got on the list. And then I never really thought I was going to get made. But then when it did come around, I actually turned it down officially, like in the moment. I said no, because I didn't think I wanted to leave where I was. I absolutely loved working in the Bronx. I loved the guys I worked with, the company, everything about it. It's like, it almost was my identity at that point.
Right.
But then I realized, I'll say yes. And if I don't really embrace this and I don't love it, I can always go back. Right. So I did it. I moved on. And looking back, it was the best thing that ever happened to my career. However, it wasn't an easy transition because I got promoted with over 20 years in the job. Most guys get promoted 8 to 12 years. I waited till after 20 to do this. And so that was the challenge in itself. It has its benefits having time on the job, being an officer, but there's a benefit in being a fireman that's a senior guy. So it is an easy bridge to gap. However, the transition is really hard.
Yeah, and I listened to you, again, talk about that, and you had said like one of the biggest or maybe the hardest parts of it were going from being the guy carrying the tools to being the guy to tell the person carrying the tools what to do. Yeah. It actually leads into something I had written down. You had talked a little bit about, on another podcast, about balancing pushing someone forward in their career or moving forward in their career yourself versus taking the time to learn the job and make the mistakes. What do you think how do you think your 20 years before you decided to promote helped you in making those mistakes? And what would you tell other guys coming on about, learning the job versus trying to rush into a promotion?
Yeah, so that's a fine line, I guess, or maybe a bit of a gray area, actually, where some departments, there is nobody taking that next step, and they just take the good kid who's motivated, and they may have 3-4 years and say, you're going to be the officer now. And many times that kid's like, I'm not ready for this. And my answer to that is, like, well, if not you, then who? And that's something to think about. Like, if you're squared away, there's a reason why they're looking at you to take on the next role. Now, there's a lot of mistakes to be made. And that's the benefit of waiting, I feel. But you can't wait forever because we know how civil service is. We know how the job is. We know how administratives are, is that when you say no, the boat can leave without you. So my advice to anyone that has an opportunity is never, ever, ever say no to anything your job is willing to offer you. Say yes. If it doesn't work for you, you can always go back, but always say yes. Now, for me, the benefits of waiting that long, and I'm not sure it was by choice. I was just having a fun time being a fireman, but
right.
I made so many mistakes, and we all make mistakes. Like every single fire go to, we make mistakes. But now I can see guys in the moment making the mistakes because I've made so many of them that I don't necessarily correct them. I watch them. It's kind of like watching your kid fall down and get back up, fall down and get back up. You can kind of like step back and be like, oh man, watch this. He's going to force the door and that adge is going to slip out of that jam. I just know the way he's holding it. I'm not going to correct him. I'm going to let him make that mistake himself. And that's the beauty of it, is because you see things happening in the moment and allows you to either correct them if it's like dire, or allows your firefighters to make those mistakes and learn. And then we talk about it after. We just had a recent fire where my irons guy asked me afterwards, what could you see that I did wrong? I said, you did nothing wrong. Here's a couple pointers. But I was in that moment stepping back and kind of laughing at myself, or laughing with the moment of like, I know it's going to happen next. And then this happened. And then he's going to correct it and go here. And it was cool to have those 3 to 10 steps ahead of what he's doing, because I've done that before. And I've made all the mistakes leading up to it.
Right. I'd heard before, I'm going to forget who says it now because I'm on the camera, but he was saying it referring to kids, but don't stop them from doing dangerous things carefully, right? So
yeah,
if they're getting ready to do something, like you said, ads is going to slip out, this probably isn't going to go exactly right, but they're still going to get the job done and they're doing okay. And I think that goes into something you said before too, is like, don't give up your moment, right? So you talked about that with like handing the tools off to maybe the younger guy in that moment or something like that, and you're an advocate for, hey, that's your job on the fire ground right now. Their time will come, but right now is your moment to make those mistakes so that you can learn from them, so that maybe if you're in the officer's seat, some years down the road, you have that mile high perspective as well.
You dug that up from a while ago. I said that a long time ago. And I kind of got some shit for that, actually. And, you know, it goes both ways. See, time and place, but I feel... So let's talk about the firefighter standpoint. That's your moment. That's your moment to make the mistakes. That's your moment to learn. If you're the senior guy, and maybe you are there for a gas leak or a water leak, and you're on the outside operating just two guys, you could say, all right, kid, force the door, and we'll go through this. And then you go through it very slowly, or you let it make those mistakes. And I think that's okay. But where do you draw the line? Like, when does that moment become yours to give? When do you have enough experience to do that? And I think that's important, that we understand when that moment comes, because we're giving up those moments far too early. Like, I've seen fires recently where guys are giving up kick-ass fires to pass the nozzle off to another guy for their experience, when in reality it's like, bro, you have 3, 5, 6 years on the job. Like, that's your experience. That's your fire to fuck up, your fire to win.
Right.
So there is a fine line. Now, from the officer standpoint, there's riding positions for a reason. And sometimes it comes down to talent. And certain fire, if I think someone has a certain task, I know in the back of my mind it's getting done because I gave him that position to get it done. And when you give up that moment, within the moment, I think there's a lack of company integrity, because it's the wrong guy, or maybe not the wrong guy, but the guy that I'm not expecting to get the job done. So I think it's a fine line or a gray area either way. Like, that moment's yours to own. It's also yours to give sometimes. But I think you have to be very careful when you find the comfort in that.
Yeah, I think I liked listening to it because I think it's an interesting perspective. It's something that gets talked about, at least in my firehouse, it's talked about a little bit, And I think what you say is interesting, because you want to make sure that the people below you or coming up behind you have the experience, right? And they can do it when they get into those positions. But especially if you're in a place that doesn't see a ton of fires, right? Like, most departments don't see fires like FDNY or Chicago or Detroit, right? We don't see that volume of fire. So when is giving that up, when do I actually really have enough experience that I can give that up and not take a lesson away from it that I might have needed? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I also see the problem where guys are giving that moment up because they're scared to fail in the moment in front of someone else. So instead of them failing and learning because they're not confident in that position or that task, they'll pawn it off on the next junior guy so they can make the mistake.
Interesting. I didn't even think about that, but 100% right. So they don't want to put their name to it, or they don't want to be the one, lines trying to come in the door and they're messing around trying to get it forced and under pressure. So they just give it up to somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes in a little bit of a big reason I wanted to talk to you and bring you on is through pretty much everything you say, humility is like an overarching theme, right?
Yeah, I mean, humility is a word that has been ingrained in my life, not just through firefighting, but just the way I was raised through my father. He was a carpenter, and just he worked with his hands. He never had a problem telling you when something didn't go right, and he would always correct it. And I always admired that about him, as well as being a great leader and a business owner and all that. Like, there was always a sense of humility in everything he did. The fireground, it gets thrown around quite a bit, and I don't think people realize what the word means. People are writing articles on it. They're doing posts on it. They're doing conferences, lectures, keynotes on it. In reality, all humility really is the will to learn. When you admit humility, you're willing that you want to learn. Like, you're in the game. You're in the ring, man. Let's do this. That's humility. So when you make your mistakes in the moment, you own them, then you talk about them, discuss them, then collectively we are learning together. That's all humility really is. But it's hard when we're all type A personalities. I'm a very quiet guy in the firehouse, but on the fireground, we're all type A to survive. That's how we survive in the fireground. You have to be a type A. When you're type A in your craft or in your passion, it's really hard to admit when you made the mistakes. And that's the challenge I see with the fire service, is that if you embrace humility or the will to learn, that is the forward progression to success, because we're learning together.
Right. And that goes for mistakes that you make that people notice and mistakes that you make that only maybe you notice, right?
Yeah, I mean, think about this, and I'm going to say this, and probably a lot of people listening or watching are kind of get a chuckle, but how many times have you been in a fire working in a truck or remotely off the line, and you take a mirror thinking it's a window? And you just laugh it off. You're like, oh, shit, that's the mirror, not the window. And you never tell anyone about it. But it happens. It happens probably at more fires than you would like to think. That's truck company mistakes. That's the integrity of the truck. That's the dance of the truck, per se, Where the engine company, everyone knows when the engine makes a mistake, because if they stretch short, firemen die. People die. We can't stretch short. So it's very, very important that the engine company, that company integrity truly is the core of this job, because we can't make mistakes there. There's no humility in stretching short. That's a real fuck up. That's why engine company firemen are problem solvers. They're solving problems in the moment because there's really no margin for mistakes. In the truck, the humility comes from, I searched a closet and got lost in it, thinking I was in an auditorium, and really got back, it was the size of a closet. That's humility, and we can talk about that. Or you attacked the door the wrong way, and the door owns you. That's something you can talk about and drill on. So humility is important, but also owning the mistake in the moment is very important, where you can correct that. A lot of times people don't want to admit the mistake in the moment, and that's when things go real bad. That's when the dominoes begin to fall. It's incredibly important in the engine company that margin for error is very, very small.
Yeah, like you refer to the engine company as the infantry of the fire service. Yeah, I like that. How did you translate that like view on humility and fucking up into training when you're at the academy, right? So I guess real quick, talk about what made you decide to go for being an instructor and being part of your fire academy.
I was always one of the guys in the firehouse that was drilling with the guys internally, and never had any desire to leave the firehouse. A guy that we worked with at one time got promoted. He ended up being captain of our probationary fire school. So he was out recruiting some guys to come in and teach under him. And one guy went out, a guy I would never have thought would go out, a real firehouse guy as well, and he loved it. And then a couple other guys went out and said, "You would love this. You got to come out. You need a break. You need this." And I said, "I don't need a break. The firehouse is great right now. I don't want to go anywhere." So I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I will give it a try, because if these guys are saying I'm going to love it, I'll give it a shot. It's something different. Everyone says you need a gig, right? Quote unquote, a gig. And that gig always gives back in the end if you do the right thing. So I went down for the interview, went through the process, and you got to commit to 3 classes. I went into my first class thinking, there's no way I'm sticking this out. I am out of here. It was tough. It was really, really nerve-wracking to stand in front of these probies, which is crazy because they have no clue what you're talking. I could be telling them everything completely wrong, and they'd believe me. But you had to learn you had to learn the material, the curriculum. You had to learn what we were training. We were doing firefighter survival on my team, which is the masks and firefighter removal and all those things. So by the time the second class came around, I kind of really enjoyed it. I got to know the material. I got more confident in front of speaking in front of the probies. And then after that, it just became like a really, really cool group of guys. And I think a lot of it too is when you're teaching with the right guys that have the right mindset, everyone's on the same page, we just feed off each other. And I found myself becoming much, much sharper teaching, because now I'm talking about mistakes, talking about my own mistakes on a bigger platform than just a kitchen table. And it kind of evolved into just something I became very, very passionate about.
I imagine that I know you call them kids, and they're not really kids all the time, right? But I imagine that they appreciate having somebody come in who's, 30, almost 30 total years of fire experience, that can come in to a bunch of people they don't know who are brand new on the job and be like, I fucked this up, and this is what I learned from it so that you don't do it again, right? That's it. I feel like when you can level with people that you're teaching and admit that you make mistakes too, even as a seasoned officer in the fire service, then the lessons tend to stick a little bit better with them.
Especially the ones struggling. You can pull them aside and say, listen, bro, I've made the same mistake this many times. It comes with time. No one's a fireman overnight. And that's what I always tell them. Nobody becomes a fireman overnight. No one's a New York City fireman overnight. One day you're in Best Buy, the next day you're crawling down a hallway. So it takes time. Like everything else, time is a tool on the fire ground and in life. And there's so many lessons and value during that time that sometimes you just have to slow down and observe and take the time to maybe smell the roses on the way in, because before you know it, you rush through certain parts of your career and you skip those mistakes or those learning mistakes and not capitalize on the moment to learn. And then you're too far on the other side of the curve where guys expect you to know the answer because you should have made the mistakes, and you dismissed it because you can't adapt to humility. You can't face the challenge of, okay, I did make a mistake. Let's talk about it. So you're right. By having some time on the job, pulling a guy aside and say, I've made the same mistake 100 times, bro. It'll come in time. You could actually see it, like their shoulders relax and say, okay, I got this. And I think that goes a long way.
I think there's so I teach for the state academy in Massachusetts, and similar to you, I love there's a few different academies. They're all great. I really love the guys that I teach with down at the state, and they all kind of have that similar mentality as well of like, hey, let me show you how to do it. Here's how I did it and messed it up, And I feel like when you, like I said, when you can level and you can see that person like, okay, this isn't just somebody that's here to talk at me, to yell at me, to make me feel like shit, but they actually care about the job and care about me like being good at the job. I think the love of the fire service kind of shows through when you have instructors like that.
And we have a very successful academy, I think mainly because we have the DIs and they're disciplined. And then we have the instructors and we're education. So we're not yelling at them. Some people have a different style of teaching, but we don't really raise our voices. Like,
right.
We're there to tell them this is what you're supposed to do. These are the testable points. This will give you success. These are all the mistakes, and this is how you survive. If you do something wrong, well, we just kind of step back, and then our DIs take over. So that's where it's good cop, bad cop, and that creates a sense of trust amongst the instructors and the student.
I like that. I actually didn't know that you guys did that. So you guys have drill instructors, and those guys handle business when it's time to handle business, and you guys impart more of the knowledge piece into them.
Exactly, and I think that's the important tool is that good cop, bad cop. We build a brotherhood we build a relationship with the probies that we are a team, and we're all scared of the DIs, and we talk it up. Oh shit, here come the DIs, man. Right. Like be squared away because we're kind of trying to help them. We're trying to guide them. A guy I used to teach with always said, "Don't be the wounded." What did he say? Don't be the wounded something or other. But he always said it, and he ingrained in these probies like, "Don't be the weakest link." And that was it. And the weakest link always stands out, and the DIs attack them.
Right. I also like, again, pulling up something you had said before, is that we get people that come into our probie schools or recruit classes, whatever you want to call them, depending on where you are, and we see people that are struggling. And oftentimes I feel like as instructors, I'm guilty of it. I know a lot of people are. You see these people and you're like, this just doesn't look like the job for you, right? And you had said that sometimes you pull them aside and you don't drop the standard, but really encourage them to keep going. So maybe there are times where it's like, yeah, this isn't the job for you, but I think being able to take that like step back and be like, okay, this person's okay. We just gotta we as instructors have to do the work and help them get through it because it's going to be better for them down the line.
Yeah, that's something where when I see someone struggling and almost debating this job isn't for them, at one time would be like, all right, next, you're out of here. Like you're not part of this brotherhood. But as the more I mature and the more I interact with young students coming onto the job, and I say students, I can't find the right word for students. I was just talking about this past weekend. They're not students. That's why I say kids. They're just probationary firemen, but they're junior guys. But I don't know what they are. But I don't like the word student. But regardless of that fact, it's the best job in the world, and no one's good at it day one. Nobody is. Now, there's a fire-to-fire IQ that comes with all this. So some people learn a little bit quicker. Some people are born with a different mindset. Some people learn differently. But before anyone throws the towel in or before you dismiss them and say, this job is not for you, I like to pull them aside and look them right in the eye and tell them, you married? If they say yes, and so you have kids and they say yes, you say, your kid's proud that you're here? Well, yeah. Is your wife proud that you're a New York City fireman? Yeah. How about your mother, your father? Your father on the job? Yeah, he retired. Man, he's proud of you, right? Yeah. You think this job's for you? And they get quiet. I go, this job is for you. You just have to find it in your soul, in your gut, to pull through this, because in the end, it's all going to be good, man. This job is the greatest job in the world. Don't blow this opportunity. It breaks my heart when I see people resign because they didn't think the job was for them. And, the job's not for everyone, let's be honest. But the ones that are on the fence, I don't think they're taking the easy way out, but they're the ones thinking that humility is not a good thing and that it's not a real thing. That's important that we instill to these young firefighters that we're all making mistakes here. We're all learning. And if you hang in there, I promise you it's the best job on the world. Just get through this.
Yeah. One of the things I like to say when I'm instructing is like, this is where you want to make the mistakes, right? Like, we're all going to make mistakes. Every fire we go to, probably everything we do in our lives, we're going to make mistakes. But like, this is where you want to make them right now, because this is where we can correct them and build a foundation so that you're going into the job when you get to your company, when you get to your department, whatever the case is, that you have some sort of platform already.
I just did a conference down in Alabama this past weekend, and Jim McCormick was there. He's the guy from Indy. He has this FTTN out there, and tremendous. This guy's an animal at these fires. He makes these fires like real fire conditions. And we had a guy go through the first scenario, and it humbled him. And he had a moment to think about if this job was for him or not. It scared the shit out of him. And we then to find out that this was his first fire. And that's okay. So this job has a way of humbling you. It could be your first fire or your 400th fire. It's always going to come back and humble you. Sometimes I think it's good to have one of those early in your career to let you know that this job is serious. You have to take it serious. And if we're not taking it serious and we're dismissing it, that's setting you up for failure, and that's setting you up for detriment where things could go really, really sideways. So I think it's good every few years that you have a fire that kind of scares the shit out of you. It humbles you. It dials you back, and it makes you realize that you have to take this job seriously.
Yeah, I feel like complacency is real, right? And complacency can come in a lot of different places. So it can come from not going to jobs at all, or it can come from doing, whatever. But I think it can also come from having a lot of easy fires, right? They come in, you go there, you put them out, nothing happens, nothing eventful, no victims, whatever the case is. And then through time in your mind, it's just, we're just going to another fire. I'm just going to do the same thing I did last time.
That's exactly what you said. It's a false sense of security that your number of fires equals how good you are. In reality, it's a quality and quantity of those fires and how many mistakes you ultimately made and corrected in that moment. That's experience, not the numbers of fires you go or you don't go to. It's the fires that you have that are valued, that when it's one of those oh shit moments and you overcome it, that's experience.
Yeah, I was just on the phone with a buddy of mine earlier today, and they had it was my original department, and they had a fire recently, and some things kind of went maybe not perfectly in the beginning of the fire. The fire was in a different location than they thought it was, but they eventually caught up to it and did a good job, made the knock. Nobody got hurt, family, no victims or anything like that, and we were talking about it, and I was like, man, I love that. I was listening to the audio from it, and I was like, I love that because you can take this fire right here. It was a low cost lesson, right? No victims got hurt. Nobody in your fire department got hurt. You didn't burn the house down to the foundation, right? So the cost relatively low for a bunch of different lessons that you can take from that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's it, is that the lessons being taken from other people's fires. I mean, I'm not here the Monday morning quarterback, but I think that a great thing to do is listen to fires in the moment. So we have these scanner apps, right? And like, I'll have it on and guys like, what are you buffing out? Come on, man. And like, in reality, I'm just listening to transmissions from all over the country. Someone has a fire, pop it on. Let me see what's going on. And you hear how people communicate under stress, and you can't duplicate that stress in training. But by listening to people under stress in real time, I think there's so much value in learning through that, is how you can maintain that communication when it's your time to have it and be like, you remember that fire we just listened to last night? The guy was screaming. Well, here you are screaming again. So just kind of like dial it in. And I think that the value of other people's mistakes, by not Monday morning quarterbacking or going on the internet and writing some bullshit comment, it's just listening to it and then talking about it and then drilling on it with your guys. I think that's a value in it, a value in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just to be clear, like I was talking to the guy who was in command of that fire. So we were talking about like the lessons going through. And I like that too, because a lot of people in any job, but in the fire service, Monday morning quarterback is definitely a big part of the fire service, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, social media kills me. Like, I know like that's kind of where I live with Top 4 Tactics, and that's where it started. But there was only a few social media platforms when I started. It was like 3 of us, maybe 3 or 4, and then now there's thousands and thousands of fire platforms, and you have to be careful out there. But that's why I stay away from the Facebook, because the Facebook, if you listen and watch them Facebook, it's always the people with the least experience have the loudest mouth, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they're just there to just to poke the bear, get the guys fired up, piss everyone off. Instagram never had that. It's starting to get that again. Now it's starting to transfer over, I think, as time progresses. But I still think that Instagram has a tremendous value because you're limited in what you can write. And so there's not too much you can really write that could piss someone off. So it's like there's some back and forth a lot of times, but you really can't get in too much depth. Instagram is just the cliff notes of an experience, or the cliff notes of a book or a chapter. It's just a small piece of information. And that's bad sometimes, though, because the small piece of information, there's room for you to interpret that the wrong way. And that's something we have to be careful with as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you throw a photo up and it shows one thing, and then the next thing you know, there's like, you didn't have your mask on or whatever the case is. The positive side though of the social media is that it's so easy for us now to go in and take other people's experiences and use them for our benefit, right? So you can go on Instagram and watch reels or learn lessons that someone like yourself is putting out, doing a little audio clip or whatever. You can find videos on YouTube. You can watch entire fires from start to finish that somebody recorded, and you can go in and learn the lessons from there. So social media has been pretty cool. What made you decide to start Top Floor Tactics?
So there was a moment, probably 2016, 17. I was kind of like in a lull of my career. Like, still loved my firehouse, loved my guys, loved going to fires, doing a ton of work back then. It wasn't like I was like, I'm over the fire service. I was just kind of like, what's next? Like, when am I going to retire? 20? Am I going to stay? Am I going to study for the next one? Like, all these things going through my mind. Find myself thinking about, what am I doing on the weekend? Am I going surfing? Am I going running? Am I going sailing? All these things I wanted to do. In reality, it's like, I kind of got discouraged in the sense that I was all in with the fire service since I was a young kid. And then I kind of hit like a little lull. And looking back, that I think everyone gets this at some point of their career. It just happens at different times. And mine happened. So I was in my garage and I was cleaning the garage doing something, and I was on YouTube. And that's when YouTube goes to the next video, right? You can do that.
Yep.
So I was watching something. I don't even know what it was about. And then it popped onto a Rescue 3 video from the 90s, 4th of July, an old famous video. And I watched it. I was like, wow, man, I used to watch this video as a kid. But that was like me watching the Super Bowl, watching these guys, these legends go to work. And then from there, it clicked over. Next one after that was over, it was National Fire Radio with Jeremy, who's a dear friend of mine now. I was like, what the hell is this? I'm like, there's a whole world. I'm like, what is this? So then, I watched that. It was an interview. And then I go to Instagram and I search firefighting. And one or two things pop up, and I start reading, and I was like, interesting. There's a subculture of this society that we're all a part of. I didn't realize it was a subculture. It's like, that's the thing with being a New York City fireman, is like, we're in our own bubble, which is good and bad, but we do things our way. And that's kind of what we're known for. But with that, by doing things our way, we're not really open to what else is going on around us a lot of times. So it took me to see that there was a subculture of the society I was living within, and I liked it. I was like, wow, this is cool. There's life in this. So I started reading some of the stuff on these posts on some of these accounts, and I was like, I could do this because I've kept a journal my entire career. So when you're a probie in this job, you get a marble notebook and you have to write every tour, what you learned, the mistakes you made. There's a reading assignment. Well, I kept mine my entire career. I still write every tour, the things I've done, the things I've learned, the mistakes I've made. It's now on my phone in the notes section, but it used to be in that marble notebook for many, many years. I have stacks of them. So I took some of those mistakes I made, some of the things I've learned over the time, and I wrote short little clips, and I posted about 8 or 9 of them right in a row. And I blocked everybody I knew, all the guys in my firehouse, anyone who knew me. I blocked them because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed to sense that I was branching out of my job, if that makes sense. It's crazy to say that today because everyone's doing it, but then nobody was really branching out of the job. And I put it out there, and it kind of went viral is back then. It didn't really go big, but I got some interest from guys, and they were reaching out. And then I realized I was kind of influencing people outside of my job. But then the real challenge came when my job started finding out about it. And then I was getting all these DMs from guys who were asking questions, and we were talking, and we were drilling, and we were bouncing fires off each other. And it became like a source of guys I worked with that I did not know, but we all had the same questions, and we started learning from one another. And that's where it kind of grew. So that's ultimately where it started. And that was in 2018.
And then what made you make the jump to taking it from posting on Instagram to having your own podcast, your own show?
Well, the podcast came mainly because Jeremy from National Fire Radio pushed me. And we became dear friends over the years. And we were just friends. I was not working with National Fire Radio. We did nothing really in common as far as became friends through social media, which became real friends. And he said, I think you have a value to start talking about some of this. And I said, I'm not doing this. And this went on for about 2 years. And finally, he's like, are you ready to do this or what? And I was like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. He bought me the Roadcaster and some stuff to get started. He pushed me to do it. And I started through National Fire Radio because he said, we will edit everything. All you have to do is talk into a microphone. I said, okay, I can do this. And it was a very, very rocky beginning. And I think anybody, as you would probably know, starting a podcast, it's so awkward. It's still awkward. Like, I really don't enjoy doing it, to be honest with you, but I know there's value because I get to travel around and I meet people and they say, oh, this episode you said that, and over here you said this. And so I know there's making an impact. So there's value in it. I just really don't enjoy it because it's very awkward to sit here and look at a camera to a microphone.
Right.
Like, this is easy. We're just bullshitting. But
Right.
when you do one by yourself and you're talking and you're like, man, this is so weird. But I know it's the next step. I'm a big Gary Vee fan. I don't know if you're a Gary Vee fan or not, but he talks about what's next. And I remember him saying it's going to go from Instagram, from posting. It's going to go to live. Then it's going to go to voice and video. And it's exactly what he's saying like 6-7 years ago. It's progressing and going that way. So it was almost like you either jump on board or the bus leaves without you. And that's kind of where the podcast came from.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. For me, it was a little bit different. Originally started with two other buddies of mine. We started doing this. They had some life stuff going on, so it ended up just being me at the end of it. But I had switched from a department to the department I'm on now, and I'd only been on maybe like 4 years. So, there's a little bit of backlash when all of a sudden you got somebody that you perceive 4 years on the job and is starting a podcast. And we didn't really know anyone, so it kind of started of us just talking about topics, kind of like you do, and then progress into this. And I love it because I don't feel like I have a lot to say for the fire service. I mean, I have a lot to say, but I don't really have the background to be telling people anything about how to do their job. But I selfishly get to come on and talk to people like you and listen and gain a lot of knowledge and share that out. And I think that's pretty awesome.
I would just say, you don't sell yourself short because what you're providing for guys of a younger generation is an avenue. And that's the main thing, is that people create platforms for themselves, to promote themselves. But if you create a platform or an avenue for other firefighters to learn, well, that's totally different. So I don't think time on the job or experience matters, as long as you're creating a platform for learning and not necessarily for promoting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's been great. I mean, it's been awesome. Like, going back to the very beginning, it turned into, we got a handful of episodes out. People realized we weren't coming on trying to goat them into talking about stuff that divides people, and then you just started sending emails out. I've had a few guys from your job on. I've had Chief Lieb and Ray McCormick on at different points, and it's humbling to see how much love for the fire service is in the fire service, right? So you can go anywhere in the country and you can find people that will take an hour out of their day for no pay to sit and just bullshit about this job to try and progress it and move it forward. And I think it's a really awesome thing.
As we're sitting here, Ray just called me right now.
Oh, did he really?
And I know he's calling just to bullshit about fires. Here's a guy who's retired how many years, right?
Yep.
When you get to a certain level of your life, I guess, with this, you can't turn it off. And I was just with Anthony Rowett down in Mobile for this conference last weekend. And we were in between students coming in the window. We're doing a VES prop or whatever. And I said, man, and all I'm doing is thinking about what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do. And I'm getting so excited to teach. And I said to him, I'm like, I can't turn this shit off, man. And it's not good. It's not good. It's overwhelming, And he's like, I'm the same way. So it's like, it's a double-edged sword. Like, sometimes we need to turn this off. And I think that's important as well. Really, really hard to do, especially when you're doing what we're doing, podcasts, and I'm lecturing and I'm teaching and I'm working. It's hard to find that balance, but I think it is important, as much as we love this, that it's okay just not to think about it, to turn down the overtime once in a while, to go hang out with your kids and do the right thing and put the phone down and not be following what fires you're missing at work. But it's a drug, man. We're all addicted to it, and that's the problem. This job is a drug.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And there's a chief local here out of Brockton, Chief Nardelli, and he says, if you guys do taxes on the side, no offense to you, but he said probably pretty hard to find a bunch of people that are going to pay money and give up their weekend to go together and learn about how to do your taxes better, right? But we see that over and over and over and over again throughout the country with firefighting. It's a pretty awesome group to be a part of, honestly.
And that's just it with our job. When that moment comes, you fall in love with it. And I think for many, and I'm seeing more and more of this, it's love at first sight. They get a little taste of it and they're all in. And that's what's these micro conferences are so good for, is allowing people to have access. FDIC, it's great, right? Everybody wants to go there. People can't afford to go there. It's like Disney World, Disneyland. It's like people love Disney, right? But they can't afford to go to the park because they outprice it. They outprice middle America. And I think that's a detriment to our young kids that love princesses and love all these things. They can't go see them in person because it takes 6 years to save for it, you know?
Right.
Same thing with FDIC. There's a lot of value, a lot of positivity with FDIC, but it's not in everyone's budget. Not every city or town is sending their guys to FDIC. So now we have all these micro conferences blossoming out of nowhere, and it gets great because it's allowing people to love the job so much quicker and so much more intimately because you're getting to meet world-class instructors. When I say world-class instructors, guys that just travel around, and they get to get different perspectives of the job. They get to see the love of a job from someone who's been doing it a little bit longer, has a little more experience, a little more exposure, and then you're out having a beer talking about their experiences, their mistakes, and the real learning takes place at the bar, at the restaurant, during lunch, during breakfast. That's the real learning, and these micro conferences are allowing guys to come into smaller towns and have those moments. I think that's a beautiful thing.
There's just, I feel like when you start going to these conferences, the people that are coming out wanting to do this training, guys like yourself, the ego is just taken down a notch, right? So they're not going and lecturing at you for an hour and then like taking off. They're doing exactly what you said, right? They're going, giving a lecture, doing a hot class, and then you're sitting at the bar and you're bullshitting, and then you're really talking about the job, right? It's a pretty cool experience, and I think that getting outside of your department and then your state and then your region is huge because there are different tactics all over the country, the way things are done. Some of that's based on the types of buildings that you find or the demographics or whatever, but you get out and actually see something different from what you're doing. And sometimes maybe it's a little lesson, sometimes it's something huge, but it's always something that you can bring back.
And I think people often ask me if I could come in and teach culture. And I always say that culture is nothing you can teach. That is inherited from the members that came along long before you. However, some places have no culture. So by getting out and witnessing other people's culture, other people's love for the job, that allows you to kind of develop your love for the job and find your way to find the culture that belongs in your region. That all comes from getting out and somewhat networking, having those moments at the bar. I'm not saying it's about drinking. It's about socializing, taking the edge off it, and being equals. We're all firemen. Doesn't matter where you're from. We're all firemen. Doesn't matter the 4 letters on your back or the patch on your shoulder. We're all firemen. So when we get a chance to sit down and break bread and talk and laugh and talk about each other's kids and talk about the funny things in life and talk about the mistakes we made, that's where the ultimate learning takes place.
Yeah, I feel like you humanize the job a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
You do that, right? How do you keep, you talk about like young people coming on the job and it's love at first sight, right? How do you keep that love going in those young people? Maybe this is, I'm sure areas of FDNY don't see as much fire as other areas, but through the country, fires, depending on where you go, aren't always there. So how do you keep interest in these young kids that come on and it is love at first sight, but maybe they're not getting to go to a fire, every shift or even every month?
That's where I think that, all the company events are very, very critical. Fires are awesome. I mean, we're all here to go to fires, but the best part of this job is the love for one another. And that we can go to softball, we can go to hockey, we can go to the company dance, we can march in the St. Patrick's Day parade. All these things that we do as a company, that builds camaraderie, that builds trust and loyalty. This job is built on loyalty. And when we lose the fact that loyalty is the ultimate love for this job, well, then we start losing the true sense of what it's about. And I think that by building that loyalty, building that sense of understanding and that teamwork, not necessarily on the fire floor, because again, we all want more fires, but at softball, at hockey, all these things, that's where we can keep guys motivated. That's where we can break the balls. We can own the moment. We can laugh together. We can cry together. And ultimately, I think that's how we keep everyone well-rounded and everyone accountable. There's standards that are set from senior guys that came long before us, so we have to maintain those standards. Those guys probably went to a lot more fires than we're going to today. It's across the board, but the standards they set have to keep up with the traditions of not only what we do in the firehouse or on the fire floor, but all the company events as well. I think that's important to keep us together and keep us moving forward.
I was just writing that down. The job is built on loyalty. I love that. That's awesome. Honestly, I think that's a good spot to drop out at, because I think it's a good lesson to end the day with. On the way out, though, do you think, not to put you on the spot, but is there something you can give to the younger people coming on this job, a piece of advice that you like to pass along, or something you like to generally tell people to help them in their career going forward?
Well, again, I think it comes down to loyalty, and that, I promise you with all of my heart that if you fall in love with this job, and I mean really love it, and I say the job, the family, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, and you love it, you nourish it, you respect it, You build off it. You maintain it. This job, the family, will take care of you and yours for generations to come. And the best part of it all is if you do these things, and they're very easy to do, you never have to say thank you. The way you say thanks is by doing the right thing and giving back to another brother and sister in need. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of the brotherhood, you realize how powerful it really, really is. So please just take care of the job.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate that. So everybody, again, I'm Mickey Farrell. Check him out, Top Floor Tactics. Check out his podcast, A View from the Top Floor. As a quick side note, the hardest podcast intro song out there.
Thank you.
I've replayed it just to hear the intro a couple of times, but make sure you check him out. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about the fire service. And again, I like episodes like this because it's not getting down to, you know, how do you hold a Halligan to get through a door. It's getting down to like, what is the fire service and what's it all about. And I think you nailed it there with the loyalty. So I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, guys, make sure you check out our next episode. And if you haven't already, check out the Metro Boston Fire School conference coming up May 17th and 18th. And we'll catch you on the next one.